This is the Charleston Wedding Podcast, your ultimate guide to everything you need to know about planning your dream wedding in charming and historic Charleston, South Carolina. Breathtaking venues, captivating traditions, the latest trends, and expert advice is here on the Charleston Wedding Podcast, bringing you insights from wedding planners, photographers, caterers, florists, and other industry experts who call Charleston home. Now, here's your host, Kathy Baxley-Stewart.
Hey, everyone. Glad you could join us for another edition of the Charleston Wedding Podcast. So, as you guys know, typically we do some wedding trivia before we introduce our guests. So, this week I was looking and thinking, okay, what kind of wedding trivia could we possibly get? And I came across some interesting things. So, I'm going to read some of these for you. We're just going to go over a few of them. I'm betting you probably haven't heard of any of these. I hadn't. So unusual wedding traditions from across the world. In Germany, the bride and groom use chainsaws. And I'm reading this because it's a good bit of information, which I couldn't imagine. I had to read on. It says, German newlyweds indulge in a tradition where the couple is expected to saw a log into two pieces. It's a task to be carried out by two people, and it symbolizes the couple's strength as they face challenges in their marriage. So I thought, I guess these are for the younger couples getting married, because it might be a little bit of a challenge as people get older. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. Romania, the bride is kidnapped. So in Romania, the bride disappears before the wedding. It doesn't mean that she has cold feet. On the contrary, it's a tradition for the bride to be kidnapped by friends and family before the wedding. Just like role play to get the bride back, the groom has to pay her ransom, but it could be through romantic gestures, which I thought was kind of funny. So in Italy, nuts are given to the newlyweds. Many of us think as confetti as bits of paper, but however, in Italian, confetti actually refers to sugared almonds. And if you guys, I don't know, I know a long time ago, people used to have sugared almonds at like wedding showers, baby showers, even wedding receptions. So that could be where that came from. So actually the guest received these as favors at the reception, and they are used to be thrown at the bride and groom, which I thought was a little crazy because it seems like it might be painful. But anyhow, that's Italy. Kenya, this one was just kind of silly. The father actually spits on the bride. I find that disgusting, but if you go to a wedding in Kenya, don't be shocked if you see the father of the bride spitting on her dress for good luck. For the Maasai people in Kenya, and I guess I'm pronouncing that right, spitting on someone is seen as a show of respect. Hoping not to jinx the marriage, the spit is meant in good faith. Ugh. So in China, the bride practices a crying ritual. So while shedding a few tears at a wedding ceremony is common everywhere, in some parts of China, the bride is required to practice crying. A month before the ceremony, the brides are expected to cry for 1 hour each day. 10 days into the ritual, she is joined by her mother, and 10 days after, the bride's grandmother joins too. The ritual dates back to China's warring states when the mother of a Zhou princess broke down in tears at her wedding. So I guess they figure if you cry a lot before your wedding, you won't cry at the wedding. Anyway, in Korea, the bride is given a goose. The monogamous animals represent the groom's pure intentions and loyalty to his bride. That's kind of funny. I'm not sure what they do with the goose afterwards, but keep it as a pet or other. South Korea, the groom's feet are beaten. So in parts of South Korea, grooms cannot leave with their new wives until they've had their feet beaten. After the ceremony, groomsmen or family members remove the groom's shoes, bind his ankles, and put ropes around them before taking turns to beat his feet with a stick or, in some cases, a dried fish. Thankfully, the ritual doesn't last long and is seen as a fun part of the day that's meant to test the groom's strength and character. And finally, this is the last one. I'm sure y'all are happy this is the last one, but anyway, this one's kind of weird. Not that the others weren't. But anyway, members of the Malaysia and Indonesia people in Borneo observe a tradition that states the bride and groom must not leave their home or use the bathroom for 3 whole days after their wedding ceremony. That's crazy. They're kept under watchful guard and allowed only a small amount of food and drinks. Not observing the ritual is said to tarnish the bride and groom with bad luck, often resulting in infidelity, the breakup of their marriage, or even the death of their children. So not to end that on a sad note, but I'm just going to say I am very happy that we all live here in the United States and we don't have all of those very strange traditions. I have a great guest. I'd like to introduce to you Kelly Hobbs, and she is the Director of Sales and Marketing with Magnolia Gardens, Magnolia Plantation Gardens. So I have a few questions for Kelly. So hi, Kelly. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Glad to have you. Have you had a busy summer?
Yes, we have had a busy summer. It really feels like all seasons are busy at Magnolia. We get a different type of guest in every season, a different type of a wedding client in every season. But summer is particularly busy at Magnolia. We have a lot of things in bloom, a lot of people visiting Charleston, and I'm sure you're aware we have a lot of guests who get married in Charleston who are from out of state. So a great time to be in Charleston.
Yeah, I know you stay busy for sure. So I have a couple of questions for you specifically and kind of let the brides know some of the things you guys provide and what you can do for them for their wedding. So I actually looked up a few things too about Magnolia Gardens. And even though I'm local here and I've been here all my life, there were some things that I was like kind of surprised at and wasn't sure that I had no idea, like these sort of background things. So Magnolia Gardens was founded in 1676. So I know it's the oldest plantation here in South Carolina. And by the Drayton family, who I found out that they actually still own the gardens and they have like a board of directors. So that's crazy that they still actually own it. But it was opened in 1870 to the public. So what makes Magnolia Plantation Gardens special for a bride to get married in? Like, why do you think brides are like super attracted to this location?
So I did want to touch on first, we actually have a historian on site, and she is constantly doing research about the history of Magnolia Gardens. She's in communication with the family members as well as the 11 board members. And we actually were established in 1679. So last year we went through a rebrand process, and that is where that information came to light. So I just wanted to share that because we only recently became aware of that ourselves.
Oh, okay. Good update.
Yes. But Magnolia is so special because it's actually the first public attraction in South Carolina. It's a romantic style garden, which is a little different for the time it was established. Typically in that time frame, we would have seen more manicured English style gardens. So kind of what you would picture with like Bridgerton or just something a little more formalized, whereas a romantic style garden, the whole concept behind that is really just letting nature do its thing and letting the different varieties of plants and flowers interact with one another how they organically just would. So that is something very unique about Magnolia Gardens. In terms of getting married or having an event with us, it's just such a special place because there's always something in bloom, as I mentioned earlier. And then we actually have a renowned camellia collection as well as an azalea collection.
Oh, that's awesome. So there are a lot of indigenous plants and flowers right there at the garden that just come up every year and don't require too much work, I would imagine.
Yes, a lot of it is natural to the landscape, so it doesn't take too much. We're really fortunate to live in a temperate climate. We get a lot of rain here, which, we may not always love as Charlestonians, but the gardens certainly love. Keeps it lush. We do have an Audubon swamp garden as part of our overall property. And in that part of the garden, we have a notable rookery. So we see a lot of birds migrating in that area, as well as wildlife, including like turtles and alligators and just a lot of great wildlife out there.
Podcasting has exploded in popularity, especially local podcasts. As of 2022, 62% of Americans have listened to a podcast. 38% have listened in the last month. 26% in the last week. The podcasting audience is booming with no signs of slowing down. Call the podcast hotline to be featured on these podcasts or to receive information about podcast marketing. Call 843-530-0403 or visit carolinapodcasts.com.
You're listening to the Charleston Wedding Podcast.
How many different venues do you guys have within the garden landscape where people can actually have their ceremony and receptions and things like that? I know you have a few.
Yes. So Magnolia Gardens is 66 public acres of gardens. Within that, we have 3 wedding and event venues that are available for rental. We also have elopement packages, which wouldn't require a client to be tied to a specific venue. They're welcome to walk throughout the gardens and see, what particular area speaks to them, where they'd like to have their ceremony. So that's an option as well. But as far as our 3 venues go for rental, we have the Carriage House and our Piazza venue, which are both situated along the Ashley River. And then we have our live oak pavilion, which is nestled so nicely in our century live oaks. And some of those are over 300 years old.
Okay, so the one with the Carriage House is actually, there's a view of the river right there, right, correct?
Yes, both the Carriage House and the Piazza have views of the Ashley River.
Yeah, and I've been out there, so I know there's also a place for the wedding party to dress and get ready.
Yes, so we do have a bridal suite with the Carriage House. There's also a bridal suite that comes with our Piazza. The Live Oak Pavilion, there is less infrastructure with that property just because it is situated under those live oaks. So the real draw of that property is going to be for a client who's seeking an outdoor experience, really wants that garden feel, maybe an alfresco dining. So that property doesn't actually have a bridal suite or a groom suite. However, with the other 2 available options on property, there's options to rent that space as well for that venue.
Okay, so that infamous bridge that everybody's seen pictures of, right? So is there a place where you can get married where the bridge is like within picture taking range, or how does that work?
Yes. The historic piece of architecture that you are referring to, I believe, is the Long White Bridge. This is one of the more notable pieces of architecture in South Carolina, and certainly at Magnolia Gardens. But for any client who is just really drawn to that piece of architecture, the Piazza, which is the porch of our historic Magnolia house, that's going to be the best venue for you. There is a summer garden lawn that overlooks the Long White Bridge, so there is an opportunity for a bride or a groom to walk over that bridge and enter their ceremony, which is just very, very dramatic and very stunning, provides a lot of great photos. But anybody who does have a wedding at Magnolia is welcome to take pictures on the Long White Bridge.
Okay, that's awesome. So what's included with the rental? Say I'm a bride and I've decided, okay, this is definitely where I want to get married. What can you provide as far as rentals are concerned?
So we do build custom rates depending on the day of the week and the time of year that someone's looking to get married or have an event with us. The event rental does include 5 hours of event. It also includes the setup and breakdown time for your vendors. So this would provide access to the property basically all day. Clients who book with Magnolia also have the opportunity to visit on an alternate date to take engagement photos or save the date photos. If a client was interested in our Carriage House specifically, that venue, as I mentioned, does come with a bridal suite. It also has tables and chairs that are available for guests. So those could be used for your wedding ceremony. Those could be used for your reception. Just really up to you and however the client's envisioning their day going. We have golf carts available for rental. We have what we're calling a people mover, which is a little bit larger than a golf cart, just because the gardens are so large. And, typically this is a big celebration for guests. They're going to have a lot of people attending, some of which may be elderly or may have mobility concerns. So knowing that we have a big property that's got a very natural terrain, we just want to have that option for guests.
They would have to bring in their own linens and things like that. And usually, I guess the caterers can help with that as well, right?
Yes. So we do have a vendor list that we give to everybody who's inquiring with us. This is just really helpful because there are so many great rental companies and wedding planning companies in Charleston. That's going to be the best place for clients to find any floral arrangements they're interested in, any linens, as you mentioned, their preferred caterer, which sometimes it's nice to have everything bundled into one. And I certainly can understand that because there's a lot of things to plan when it comes to a wedding. But this does give the client the flexibility to kind of select something that's personal to them and fits within their price point.
We mentioned property tours, and you also mentioned that you have a lot of people come in from out of town to get married. I'm assuming that a lot of these guests may want to make this like a little mini vacation here in Charleston. So how do you arrange the property tours for a wedding party? Like, how does that work? I know they may want to be a part of the sightseeing and then go to the wedding, or does it happen before or maybe a couple of days after? How do you guys typically use that?
So we do see this a lot. Of course, guests are seeking Magnolia Plantation and Gardens because it is such a horticultural phenomenon. It's such a beautiful place to get married. So when you have an event here, your guests get to enjoy that too. But there's so much to offer at Magnolia. We are open 9 to 5 daily to the public because we do offer tours of the Magnolia House. We have a nature train tour that takes guests throughout the gardens, a nature boat tour that takes guests along the Ashley River. And we do have historic guided walking tours that speak to the gardens and the plants and the vegetation within the garden. So it is very common that guests getting married with us want to share that experience with their family and friends. And we certainly can do that for them either prior to the event, the day of the event. So while the bride and groom might be getting ready, it's something for your guests to do. So in that scenario, we would provide our clients with a special discount code that they can just use online and share with their family and friends so that they can see more of Magnolia while they're here during the day, see the wildlife that comes out while the sun's out, and also still enjoy the property after hours when we are closed to the public.
Well, they can do it at their leisure. So that's a wonderful idea. They're not tied to a certain time. They can kind of make that schedule themselves.
Yes. And we know that this is going to become a special place for the couples getting married with us. So we also invite them to come back every year on their anniversary, and they have complimentary garden admission as well.
Oh, nice. Well, you mentioned you're busy a lot. There's weddings that go on pretty much year round. In your opinion, what do you think is the best time to get married at Magnolia Gardens?
I kind of think it's a trick question just because I mentioned there's always something beautiful blooming in the gardens. In the winter, we really see that camellia collection come out. In spring is when we start to see the azaleas bloom. In summer, we get a lot of color due to increased rain. So that's where we're going to see the lush greens. We're going to see daffodils, roses, hydrangea. And then winter, our trees really become the star of the show. So including the oaks and that beautiful Spanish moss that we're known for, as well as sweet gum trees and Japanese maple. But if I did have to give you a month in particular that I love, I would say February. I'm a little partial just because I did get married in February as well in Charleston. So I think it's a beautiful climate. Fall is very popular among guests inquiring with us. However, fall, we do have concerns of hurricanes in the low country. So I think you really get that temperate climate in February. And again, our gardens specifically have a lot in bloom with the camellias and the azaleas starting to bloom at that time.
I'm surprised you said February. That's pretty amazing. I would have thought you would have said spring, but that's interesting. You get a whole different range of flowers and flora that are going to be there in February. And a lot of times in February, people think, oh, it's going to be freezing. And that's not necessarily the case in Charleston. You really don't know. So what a great option just to think, oh, wow, I'm not going to rule out February or even January. I'm going to try and look at some of the spring flowers that are starting to pop up. And we do have that. Like we do have azaleas that start to pop up in February. So that's interesting. I'm glad you said that. We touched a little bit on the wedding vendors, and I know you have a preferred list of wedding vendors that you refer brides and grooms to. Are they also permitted to bring in any other vendors that maybe aren't on your preferred list, or how does that work exactly?
We find that many couples, they prefer receiving this list because it's a great place for them to get started. I'd also recommend anybody interested in getting married at Magnolia would check out our Instagram page at Magnolia Weddings. That's a great place to source your vendors as well, because we do share images from real weddings and events at Magnolia, and we do tag the vendors. But we're constantly reevaluating that list just because there are so many talented vendors in Charleston. We want to make sure that we share the love and that we're correctly pairing our guests with wedding professionals so that both are going to be happy carrying out these events. No one is required to use anyone on our list. We do highly recommend they use the caterers on our list. However, if somebody did want to bring in a caterer that we were not familiar with, we would just request a phone call or an on-site meeting. And the reason for that is we do have 3 venues, as I mentioned to you before. And not everyone has been to Magnolia. So we want to make sure that you're familiar with the space, you're familiar with the kitchens on site, the accommodations, so that we can all feel confident that you're going to carry out the event in a great way.
I think the preferred list is a great way to go. You guys have probably worked with them in the past, and so you know that they're reputable. There won't be any surprises for the bride and groom. So I'm going to, just from my end of it, highly recommend that they work with some of the preferred vendors, because, I mean, we know that they're tried and true. But like you said, there's so many new vendors coming into Charleston. Charleston's been the mecca for weddings for several years now, and there continues to be an influx. So it's a good thing to have a variety of people that you can choose from. But yeah, the tried and true ones are safer, maybe a little safer for the brides. So good. I'm glad that you said that. So I'm a bride and I want to book the date. How do I go about doing that? Do I need to do that 6 months in advance, a year in advance? How does that work?
Because we do have multiple venues, that gives us the luxury of if guests were on a shorter time frame, we probably do have something available for them. Typically, we see our booking window about a year and a half to 2 years out. Right now, we are still booking 2024. We do have some great dates still available, but we do have a lot of clients coming to us now seeking dates in 2025. And I think that's something you'll find across Charleston, with that booking window being a year and a half to 2 years out.
Sooner the better.
Yes, the sooner the better. So once guests reach out, we do encourage people to come on site and have a tour. As I mentioned, there are a lot of people inquiring that are out of state. So we do make accommodations for those guests, and we can do a virtual tour. We're actually in the process of working with the Knot to get virtual walkthroughs of our properties as well. So that will help make that a little bit easier. But we do encourage that walkthrough so we can really understand what you're envisioning. You can see all 66 acres of the property and what your guests are going to have access to. And then we can narrow down what date you might be interested in, and we can provide a custom proposal.
Definitely one of the first things they choose is going to be a venue. So getting that done and out of the way sort of opens up the rest of their time to continue planning their wedding. So yeah, definitely get your venue booked as soon as possible. And I know you guys have done the Charleston Bridal Show with us before, so what a great way as well to have the brides come in, talk to you, get some more information, meet you face to face. I always say face to face is the best. Kind of get to know them a little bit and let them feel comfortable with you as well. What we've been doing for the last, I think, 4 or 5 episodes of the podcast is we have had people write in with their wedding dilemmas. This is from Allie. She writes in, she's on James Island, and she says her mother-in-law is highly allergic to flowers. She has requested they have no flowers or plants at the wedding. Have you seen decor done with any artificial florals?
Absolutely. It's funny. This is the question that came up because my mom is actually a florist. So I feel like I've seen everything when it comes to florals. My mom, who is a florist, would probably recommend to use high-end silk florals. So that is going to be an alternative to using real flowers if you do have concerns about allergies. And then I have seen stunning events where there's no floral, and maybe the centerpiece is a ton of candles or something natural like wood, or here we see a lot of palm fronds just because we have beautiful palmetto trees and palm trees here in the Low Country. But it is not uncommon. And I think they make alternatives that are very nice. And honestly, when the lighting is dimmed and you have some pretty candles lit, you wouldn't know the difference anyways.
Okay, well, that's great. And we didn't rehearse this. You had no idea I was going to ask you this question. So good answer, but I figure you've seen it all. So you probably had a good answer for that. So Kelly, thank you so much for being with us. And as always, we are planning your dream wedding 1 episode at a time. Hope you guys will join us next time. Thanks again and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Charleston Wedding Podcast. Be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of the Charleston Wedding Podcast.